News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. And there's your closing bell for this Friday on Wall Street, where stocks continued their sell-off as data showed a plunge in U.S. consumer sentiment and a surge in long-term inflation expectations. Now, Bloomberg's Michael McKee says it's those higher inflation expectation numbers that really moved the markets.
It was the inflation expectations numbers on a one-year basis. People think inflation this year is going to be 5%. 5 to 10-year inflation is going to be 4.1%. These are significant moves. And I wouldn't think the Fed is terrified, but they're keeping an eye on this.
Bloomberg's Michael McKee, and we're also keeping an eye on the markets. We bring you the closing numbers each day here at Bloomberg. S&P 500 lost 112 points. NASDAQ is down 481. The Dow is down 716 points. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.25% and the 2-year yield at 3.9%. Now, where is all this coming from? Inflation expectations are higher than expected in the latest University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report. Director Joanne Shu says this crosses all demographics, including political parties.
What's really critical is that the deterioration we see in multiple dimensions of the economy, we see that among Democrats, of course, but critically among independents and Republicans as well. It's pretty much a consensus, not just across political affiliation, but across income, across education and age. All groups are in agreement that things are worse now than they were a month ago.
University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report Director Joanne Shu tells Bloomberg Intelligence that for most of last year, sentiment was on the rise, but that momentum has not just stalled, it's reversed. Consumer spending in February was weaker than expected, with inflation-adjusted spending edging up 0.1% after falling in January. Former St. Louis Fed President Jim Bullard tells Bloomberg TV that tariffs don't cause inflation. Not exactly.
Inflation is a product of monetary policy over the medium term, and it's not up to the trade representative to control inflation. It's up to the policymakers to control inflation, and they have to adjust policy appropriately given everything else.
Former St. Louis Fed President Jim Bullard tells Bloomberg Surveillance the Fed is not expected to reach its 2% inflation goal in the next 2 years, and the probability of the Fed raising interest rates is rising slightly. And part of what's driving this, the concerns over tariffs and a widening trade war. President Trump promising country-by-country reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd. Now, Bloomberg News has learned the European Union is identifying concessions that it is willing to make in what it calls a term sheet. Brendan Murray is Bloomberg's global trade editor.
I think the EU is telling us that they've tried to negotiate with Trump, and they've come back with the understanding that there's nothing they can do before then.
Bloomberg's Brendan Murray reports the areas where Europe is willing to negotiate include lowering its own tariffs, mutual investments in the U.S., and easing certain regulations and standards. President Trump and Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney have agreed to meet after Canada's election. The call came after Trump signed an executive order slapping 25% tariffs on auto imports. Carney vowed that Canada will retaliate if Trump goes through with this, and Trump says he absolutely will follow through.
He's going through an election now, and we'll see what happens. But we have Liberation Day, as you know, on April 2nd, and I'm not referring to Canada, but many countries have taken advantage of us, the likes of which nobody even thought was possible.
Trump has repeatedly said Canada should become the 51st state. Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance at a military facility in Greenland said Denmark hasn't, quote, done a good job at keeping Greenland safe.
There has been an expansion of the security footprint and the security interest of Russia and China. They're doing what they believe is in their interest. The United States must do what I know is in our interest, which is to make sure that Greenland is safe.
President Trump reiterating his desire for the U.S. to take control of Greenland as a U.S. territory, despite opposition from Greenland's new prime minister and 85% of Greenland's population. The founder of a startup company that claimed to be revolutionizing the way college students apply for financial aid has been convicted of defrauding J.P. Morgan Chase out of $175 million. Prosecutors say Charlie Javis tricked the bank by saying that her company, Frank, had more than 4 million customers when it actually had served as few as 300,000. Javis faces the possibility of a lengthy prison term. A divided federal appeals court will allow President Trump to fire members of 2 independent agencies. In today's decision, the court halted decisions by lower court judges that had blocked Trump's removal of the chair of the National Labor Relations Board and a member of the Merit Systems Protection Board. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.